Welcome to our session here on why IT must drive the next wave of cloud innovation. I'm Nick Brackney from Dell Technologies, and with me today is Mark Bowker from ESG, and we'll get right into it.
Sounds good.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah. So one of the biggest things that we were tracking for 2020 last year was that technology has reshaped every industry, and we've been seeing all these data points that show that the economy is increasingly going more and more digital. And as such, data and software is going to play a massive role in delivering differentiation and competitive advantage for companies. But with the changing and the challenging business climate of 2020 that we've seen so far, Mark, is that getting even more pronounced and more important?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. There's no question. I think that, I think it's exciting times if you're in IT, right? If you're inside an IT organization, inside IT ops, or if you're a developer or even information security team, these are exciting times because things are changing. A lot of times those folks spend so much time just kind of maintaining their current environment. And what I see is so exciting now, Nick, is due to kind of big changes in the market around cloud consumption, big changes around changing the security posture of the company, big changes about how applications are built, really makes it exciting times for IT organizations.
For sure. And what we've been seeing is that really it's coming down to running your apps in multiple clouds.
True.
People have to innovate really anywhere. And, repatriation has been one of those things that we keep hearing about. Now, the cloud vendors do a great job. And, these clouds, there's a lot of great technology and things you can tap into and benefit from. But we keep seeing repatriation because I don't think everyone always thinks critically about how they should be approaching cloud. And, defining a multi-cloud strategy really is dependent upon having a central voice, somebody in IT taking the reins and saying, this is how we're going to go and do this. So, here are four considerations, outside of security and outside of other regulatory compliance, that kind of considerations. These are four things we think about the workloads themselves that can really determine your success when moving to the cloud. So the first one is providing a better application and developer experience, right? That's really what you're
Big one.
in the first place, what you're trying to accomplish. And have you seen this, Mark, is somebody, putting in a workload in the cloud and then realizing, my developers don't know how to use the tools, or haven't trained them up, or now I've got all these applications left in my own data center that don't get as good of value as the ones that are in the cloud. What are you seeing there?
Yeah, no, I've seen those scenarios. I've seen worse. I've seen, CIOs lose their jobs because they've gone off and taken something and placed it in a cloud for all the right reasons, to be honest. But then only to realize they opened up themselves to unnecessary risks, and that risk caused them to lose their job. So it's crazy. At the end of the day, I mean, if you're a developer or an IT person, you love these new tools and these new services. So you're anxious to use them, and you want to be able to apply them to, I'll say, current footprint of IT investment. But it's a challenge because, what risk does it open up? Can I take current investment, and are they kind of consistent across, new tools that I may adopt? And it's a challenge. And also, by the way, this doesn't all happen in the four walls of an IT data center. It's shadow IT, line of business owners, and others.
Sure. Yeah, and so, when we talk about the next one here, getting the most value from data, as we saw in the last slide, data is becoming the key differentiator for organizations. And, cloud, it operates differently. And I think data is the one thing that sometimes will break cloud economics wide open or will create a lot of challenges in how it's being used. What are you seeing with data?
I think the thing with data that I find fascinating is basically applying intelligence to it, right? So if I can take data, I've typically done things with data inside a data center to, run queries, run applications, store, and all that great things. But now, wait a second, what if I can take data that's sitting in a cloud and being able to process things faster, get more real-time information, be able to make more of a proactive type of decision? The other thing that's really interesting is this idea of data at the edge, right? Data's at the edge. How can I make quicker inference how can I basically take action on that data without having to ship it all the way back into the data center. So I think there's some fascinating things just to watch out how people are taking that intelligence and applying across all three places.
Yeah. And then the next thing here is really around the network, right? And delivering services anywhere. So what we've seen is we've seen an explosion at the edge, right? Data being generated at the edge that needs to be processed and needs to be sent somewhere. We've also seen that most organizations now are really spending a lot of time thinking about, applications that run outside the LAN that are in the cloud. How are organizations able to stay in control when so much of their application and data footprint is residing in areas that are really difficult to deploy technology solutions that they can manage?
Yeah, but they aren't, right? I mean, that's the issue. I think that the innovation is there to take advantage of the capabilities that you just talked to, Nick, but the question is that's a challenge for them, is how can, there's certain information and data that I can certainly, I'll say, is less risk. So if I'm capturing information from some manufacturing floor that's talking, kind of, I'll say, production of those machines or kind of just input from those machines, sure, I can kind of move things across with a little bit less risk, but if there's personal information out there, if there's company kind of IP out there, I can't be just shipping that across the network with just, no standard good IT practices in place. Mm-hmm. And that's what I see is people really need to take those IT practices they know and apply it outside of their data center to these other consumption models.
Now, the cloud, a lot of people mistake availability zones for data protection, right?
Oh my goodness.
That, hey, I've got it in 2 places, it's good. And then all of a sudden, a corrupted file gets replicated across at like a millisecond speed. Right. So how should people be thinking about protecting their data across all these different heterogeneous environments?
I think the biggest thing there is data protection isn't anything new, right? That's been around as long as data centers have been around. But in many cases, companies have mastered it inside their data center. So they can understand what's being protected, how to recover that data, what should happen in the event of, even I've seen like ransomware attacks, how do I actually recover, right? How do I recover from that event? So I think the initial thing is look at the investments you have and understand how those investments around business continuity or data protection itself can really stretch and extend into these other operating models. So if I do consume from cloud provider X or cloud provider B, I can have that same consistency to be able to protect that data in it. Or in some cases, it's don't put the data there in the first place. Let's find a different model to be able to work around.
Right. So, we've talked a little bit about this multi-cloud, and
it's real, Nick, just in case you're wondering, it's real.
Yeah, well, it is, but we have all these lovely buzzwords all the time. And I like to think about it from a standpoint of just the reality that you're faced with. Multi-cloud isn't a strategy necessarily. It's not a posture. It's just the reality of doing business right now. You really can't escape it. And so, most people thought, hey, I'm going to get into this. I have a public cloud, maybe I have a private cloud. Hopefully they're connected. But
right.
They realize that's not the case. They've got more than one, right? And I think the most common reasons we laid out here at why this might be happening or why it is happening is it falls into 2 camps. One, strategic. Either Google has good AI and Amazon's great at packaging apps, and you decide to be in both of them. It could be a risk mitigation. You're worried that one of these cloud providers may become at some point competition for your line of business, or maybe you're worried that I can't see around the corner. I don't know what's coming, and one, you can't bet on any one of these guys without betting against another one, and right. 2, even if you pick the right company who's going to be the winner, you don't know if they're going to prioritize your vertical. So that's really challenging. And then finally, I'm sure you see a lot of this too, is mergers and acquisitions and shadow IT. So talk to me a little bit about, the pain that you see that from your engagements and your discussions with customers about how they're seeing this manifest in their business.
Yeah, in some cases, there's just no consistent, I'll say, language, right? They almost all require their own decoder ring in some cases. So Now, if I'm running IT ops, I have to have an expert in cloud A. Then I have to have another expert in cloud B. They may be doing the same thing and offering similar services, but the language is a little bit different. The service may be more advanced or less advanced than the other. And now that gets to be very difficult from an organizational perspective from me. Then I've got developers that have a lot of demand of what they may be doing on one cloud, but there may be an advantage of another cloud that they should be using. So now I've got kind of the IT with the developers trying to work together, and I end up with organizational barriers inside of there. Then I factor in information security as well. So it gets very, very difficult just from an organizational perspective, never mind some of the technology or architecture perspective.
Sure. So you're seeing a lot of complexity because of management tools being different, infrastructure being different, so you can't migrate workloads around very easily. And even the developer tooling is a challenge too. And finally, the last thing here is uncertain security postures. One of the things I always see is the shared responsibility model. I keep hammering that because every customer I talk to, only about 30% of them know like what they're actually on the hook for. Talk to me a little bit about how the different ways in which all of these clouds operate and the responsibility that still sits with the business. How does that leave them open and exposed to risk?
Yeah, so it does. You're absolutely right. I mean, just because you move a workload or you consume a service from one of these cloud service providers doesn't mean you're automatically free, right? Doesn't mean you're automatically free and have lost all responsibility. So in some cases, it's a matter of, I may hand over that responsibility of maybe pieces of my infrastructure over to that cloud provider. I may hand over pieces of kind of that network together, but it's a matter of, to your point, you've got to understand what that shared responsibility model is. So everybody on the team within the IT organization truly understands what they're responsible for. So they still need to apply security practices. They need to still have training maybe even around these different cloud solutions so they can really understand, have I exposed myself to anything when I move something in the cloud, or have I actually tightened up and improved security in some cases as well?
Sure, no, that makes perfect sense. So, we talked a little bit about data and the challenges of data early on, and I kind of just wanted to do a double click on this and just really emphasize this. I think there's these things about data in the cloud that aren't very intuitive that you wouldn't necessarily think about on the first time you're putting an application up in the cloud, but over time become the gotchas, if you will. So the first one is data gravity and latency issues. So I always like to joke to people, we still haven't found a way to travel faster than the speed of light. So the distance between where the data is and where it's being consumed creates latency. And, especially with rather sizable workloads that use massive files, we're also seeing that simply the size of and the heaviness of the data, it can be really difficult to transport that to and from the cloud. So, that's really problematic. And then we get into data management across the clouds. As we talked about different tools, different methods, it's really difficult and confusing sometimes for people to figure out where their data is, how much data they have, what the bill for that data is. It's all hidden away, and it's almost as cloudy as the cloud itself, right? It's like, and then the next one I really want you to maybe touch on a little bit, cost of availability and access. This is one of those things that I find that's really interesting here. It runs so much differently than, say, the spin up and spin down mentality of an application. So can you talk to me about, with data, how access and egress fees can really impact your cloud deployment?
Yeah, I mean, it's as you can imagine, it's a pretty easy street to get from where your data is, likely in your data center, into the cloud. That's pretty simple highway to truck down. And what the challenge happens, and what I see people not prepared to do, is they kind of think of that as migration, right? That's the migration, kind of going into the data center and moving things up to one of these clouds. And they consider those costs. So they say, okay, even if there's a cost of transport to do that, they're thinking the benefit once I get there is big enough to outweigh those transportation costs. But then what I do see is them quickly realizing, are we producing more data than we thought? Is our data growing faster than we thought? Is that an issue? Can we access that data, whether it be geographic regions, whether or not the way the application is accessed? Then it becomes very tricky, and I've seen scenarios where, in days, even I've seen it measured in weeks to be able to say, okay, now I need to, in some cases, truck that data from that cloud provider back into a data center or back into even a different data center. And that's not an ideal situation, right? I mean, nobody wants to go through that, but we see it happening in cases.
And you're kind of hitting on the next point, which is vendor lock-in. Getting in is easy, getting out is hard. So be mindful about where you put your data, because it's such a huge competitive advantage for your company. You want to make sure that it's accessible and usable.
Right.
So, shifting gears to data protection, this is another one of those things, like I said, people mistake availability zones for backup. What we found, we did some recent research here, and, multi-cloud has been great for giving people, access to all these different technologies that help drive their business forward, but it's created massive data protection challenges. And so what we saw here from the 1,200 people or the 1,000 people that we interviewed, was that 82% of them said they had an event in the last year. They had an outage or they lost data. And it almost seems like it's inevitable. You're going to have a problem. And so then when you see that it takes them, 66% said that it takes them 3 hours to recover from that downtime. Especially right now in these challenging business climate where, the business is IT, that just a non-starter. So how should organizations be thinking about data protection, business continuity, disaster recovery, all of those things, in one little ball here as they plan their cloud strategy?
Yeah, I think it has to kind of shift that those type of priorities to the top of the list, right? And in the case of, I kind of view kind of data protection and recovery and all these pieces and business continuity in general very similar to the way I look at security, right? In many cases, we don't want to go reinvent the wheel of something we're already doing well in our IT architecture. Sure. So if we don't have to reinvent the wheel, how can we involve our data protection experts and our team early on in the cloud process, right? Mm-hmm. Because likely we're seeing now where those tools do have the capabilities to, work with different type of cloud architectures. Maybe not all of them, but there's some ability that can help understand, okay, what can we move? What shouldn't we move? When can we move? Type of thing.
Right.
And then it's just also an understanding of, okay, what's and here you've got it great. I mean, what's the cost of that downtime, right? What's the cost I associate with what that downtime can be, and how can I quickly get the business back up? Because you're absolutely right. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of what the impact is and what's it going to cost the business.
That's great. So I really want to shift up gears and go to the research that you guys did for us.
Sure.
It was really very intriguing. So, here we think, that having a centrally managed cloud strategy can address some of these issues. So I'll click through it and we can talk a little bit about this, what you're seeing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the first thing we kind of looked at is so we're in your very early points, Nick, right? Are you using more than one provider? And guess what? No. 86% saying they're using more, utilizing multiple CSPs today and expect to kind of even do more out. So I think this is the norm that we have to operate in. It's not unreasonable to think that people are going to consume from every major cloud service provider out there for different reasons. And by the way, for the right reasons in a lot of cases. Sure. But in order to do that, kind of went to your point that you just said, is okay, how can I do that without treating each of them as an island, right? I don't want to treat that as an island. This is a new island. I want to be able to say, okay, same piece of land, how can I kind of operate across all of those together?
Yeah, makes sense. And so, what did you find around this idea of consistency that we had talked about?
Yeah, so one of the things we ask, you can kind of see here in the question, is say, as in respect to kind of other things you're doing in IT, how important is it for your organization to enable kind of this choice of workload placement? Because that's really what it comes down to, right? In the past, I kind of, the choice was, I want my workload on this server that has all the CPU and all this, memory in it so it runs faster. Well, that was kind of easy back then because you just arm wrestle the other IT guy and you kind of say, all right, you can use it on my server or their server. So that was pretty easy back then. Now there's so many different places. So it's now a matter of, 83% of the organizations here, want to have that flexibility and have that as a top priority when they're making these technology decisions.
Mm-hmm. And this is why, right? We're seeing that people continue to have struggles when it comes to figuring out which workloads to put in the cloud, right?
Yeah, I mean, we aren't perfect, right? I mean, I know if I'm in IT, I want to move something to the cloud, but I may run a little bit faster than I should, or I may make it without kind of having more understanding the full impact of that decision. So we're seeing here, 77% have repatriated or moved cloud workloads back because whoops, you know what? I may not involve the security team. That doesn't have that security posture that we're looking for. The cost model of that wasn't something I thought through, and I can actually, run it through, our internal IT or our on-prem IT better than I could in the cloud. And then even limited access, right? We see this all the time where some of these clouds have technology or services that are, new. They're still developing. They don't have the full features of that new technology as a lot of on-prem technology has had for many, many years.
Mm-hmm. And so how can organizations, address this?
Yeah, so here we wanted to know, how can you, what are ways you can kind of reduce the number of security breaches, app outages, all stuff we just talked about, kind of other events here.
Some of the reasons why people are moving back, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, when we ask that, here respondents, really believe that they can reduce that downtime and they can reduce those security events by having a strategy that has that management consistency across clouds. So I don't need to have my IT ops person speak a different language than my information security person, than my developer people. I want them all to speak the same language, all under some consistent management. As I adopt more clouds, I'm able to, avoid these events, avoid these, security outages and other public cloud events.
But the benefits of consistency go well beyond just security, right?
There's no question, right? I mean, even to think about it from IT operations perspective, right? So can I provision resources? Can I protect resources? Can I have visibility into data that's moving? I mean, the list goes on, right? Where there's a lot of things that even here you're kind of seeing is a typical organization that's actually moving workloads. If they have that consistent workload, they're able to, move things faster. So if I have that consistency across hybrid and multi-cloud, 4.7 days, right? Well, what if I don't? It's taking 16 days. I think that's crazy, right? I mean,
and that's per app.
It's crazy.
When I heard that, I always ask my customers. They go, yeah, I'm going to re-platform everything. I'm cloud first. And then the next question I ask them is, how long is it going to take you to do that? Per app. And they go, 16 days. And I go, how many apps do you have? And they say 1,000. It's a multi-year project.
It is, and I think that's the trouble, right? I mean, if you don't have that level of, and some of it's just, if I have to relearn and retrain my organization, and if I have to go out and spend money on training, if I have to spend money on new certifications, that gets very hard. It takes time for all that to happen. So here it's just a matter of with that consistency where I can have that viewpoint in that management that is the same across those clouds, just really helps me be able to make these decisions obviously much faster.
For sure. And speaking of speed, right? Developers, what do they get from this?
Yeah, no, this is a big one. So this comes into, the software development pipeline has changed, right? You kind of see things about, certainly integration with, CI/CD pipelines kind of being very important. So I think that really what we see happening is developers operate at a pace that IT operations is kind of needs to catch up to.
Sure.
So what they're seeing here is, hey, if I have some of that consistency, 96% expect improvements in the ability to push code in production, gives them that ability to do so. And they also they're moving from the fact where this isn't something that's going to happen weekly or monthly. They're looking to push that to daily, multiple times a day, and even in some cases hourly to be able to do so.
Yeah, that's crazy, especially when you think about being across multiple environments and having all these developers pushing code all over the place.
Yeah, and having what if you didn't have visibility into it? What if there is simple just access problems to it? I mean, it can be a nightmare.
And continuing on this fact, I thought this was a pretty cool data point here for the business, right? What's the benefit in investing in this for the business?
Yeah, I mean, so we asked here is ultimately, what's management consistency give you as far as being able to have and reduce kind of that life cycle time? And these are big numbers when it comes to IT, right? Where 37% saying 1 to 2 months, 38% saying between 1 and 4 weeks. I mean, this is all due to the fact that there isn't what it eliminates, Nick, and what I see it eliminates is there isn't now developers have to stop and wait for IT, right? And then IT has to go off and do their thing, which involves working with information security. Information security comes back, IT operations kind of figures out more, then kind of eventually gets back to the developer. Since there is such that consistency across those teams and across those environments, allows them to respond. So there may be some approval process in there, but it happens much quicker.
Yeah, and I have to think, especially this year with digital transformation becoming the thing that organizations need to do just to survive. Taking on new customer touch points, improving productivity for workers, and as they're sitting at home, it seems like getting this kind of agility is very critical and top of mind.
There's no question.
Yeah. So but at the end of the day, IT budgets, they're not limitless, right? So I think this was also a good point that we saw that there was actually a cost reduction as part of this too.
Yeah, I mean, well, think about it. If I have multiple management tools that I have to manage, operate, maintain, train on, there's a cost to doing that. Never mind, okay, now what if I have to make a change, or what if something, different happens? Mm-hmm. So yeah, we saw that on average, the cost improvement with that consistent management really looks like it's, almost 20%, right? Yeah. I really see things move inside of IT organizations when it's single digits, nothing happens. Double digits in the teams, people start to consider it. When it gets upwards of 20%, people start to realize, okay, you know what? Even if there's an initial cost to that investment, I know my savings over time is just going to save me from, hey, I can operate better throughout the day, I can sleep better at night, and I don't have to worry myself about the weekends as much either.
Good, yeah. So our final slide here, just summarizing what we found from all these data points across everyone we interviewed. Why don't you just take us home here and explain,
what's kind of cool here is, some people have leapt out in front of this, right? And do have established some consistency across those platforms with management solutions. And here are the benefits, right? I bet nearly the one we just talked about, nearly 20% expect cost reduction. There's a big cost to, at some point, I've got to move something. So if I've got to move something that's going to take me time, well, I can save 35% expecting that kind of reduction in time. We talked a lot about, how many person hours this can save a week. Exponentially, based on the number of applications or workloads that you have, can make a huge difference. Certainly from project cost savings, so a new application, maybe modernizing a new application, developers are off using these cloud services. We want to encourage that, right? We want to encourage the builders to do so. Being able to have that consistent management drives down those costs even better. Kind of the timeline, every project, especially those bigger application development projects, always have overages. They're able to contain it more because there's consistency, sure, but there's options to get to tools that they wouldn't have been able to get to in the past, or new cloud services, and they can do so there. And then the other one, obviously, people that are kind of built on IT and built on products. Guess what? I can get changes out and I can get product out faster than I ever have been before.
Great. Yeah. So, I mean, it seems like there's something for everyone in the business, right? Developers, business units, IT. But in order to get there, I think that it's IT's role to really become that business enabler. And, if you want to call it a cloud broker, maybe that's the term. I don't know. They need to be the people who empower the business to get to the cloud and tap into the benefits of it wherever they're going to deploy.
I totally agree. It has to, the business benefits alone, forget about the technology benefits, really can be phenomenal. And you're absolutely right. IT has an excellent opportunity to step in and say, all right, let us, really be that point where we can help decide and make the best decisions, maybe where a workload may go. But you mentioned all these things earlier. We can still protect the data. We can still do good things with that data and apply intelligence to it. Mm-hmm. And all along where we're kind of providing, that more, I'll say more predictable operations across all those environments, taking advantage of all those pieces.
Well, Mark, you've been great. Thank you for joining me today. And for everyone who's, listening at home, thank you for taking the time to learn a little bit more about our approach to cloud and some of the things that we found in the cloud. And if you want to learn more about this research that ESG did for Dell Technologies, you can go to delltechnologies.com/cloud, and there's an infographic and a lot of great research there that you can tap into. And you can also learn more about the Dell Technologies Cloud. Thank you for joining me.